Commander Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. His breath made fog on the glass as he stared at the massive alien vessel ahead. The ship was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It was like a floating city made of metal and light. Strange blue energy flowed along its surface like water. "Would you look at that?" whispered Dr. Lisa Carter beside him. She was Earth's top diplomat, chosen to speak for all humans. Her voice shook with wonder. "It's beautiful." Captain Ben Clark stood behind them, his arms crossed. He was the military man of their group. His face was hard as stone, but his eyes were wide. "It's also armed to the teeth," he said quietly. The transport ship moved closer to the alien vessel. Jake could see other smaller ships moving around it like busy insects. Some looked like nothing he had ever seen before. They had no wings, no engines that he could spot. They just floated in space as if by magic. A voice spoke from the ships. "Speakers?" The words were strange at first, then a machine changed them into English. "Human delegation, you are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Please prepare for boarding." Jake felt his stomach twist. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. After years of sending radio signals into space, someone had finally answered. The aliens had come to Earth 3 months ago. They said they wanted to meet with human leaders. They said Earth was ready to join something called the Galactic Council. The transport ship landed with a soft bump. Jake straightened his uniform and checked his appearance one last time. Lisa smoothed her hair and picked up her briefcase full of documents about Earth and humanity. Ben adjusted his medals and stood tall. The door opened with a hiss. Cool air flowed in, carrying strange smells. It was like flowers mixed with metal and something else Jake could not name. A figure waited for them in the doorway. The alien was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow softly. It had 4 arms and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice was smooth like silk. "Welcome, humans. I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Velkari Empire. I will guide you to the council chamber." Jake had seen pictures of aliens before, but meeting one in person was different. The alien moved like flowing water. Its clothes seemed to be made of light itself. Every step it took was perfect and graceful. "Thank you," Lisa said. She tried to sound calm, but Jake heard the nervousness in her voice. "We are honored to be here." Zethkar led them through halls that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with moving pictures of stars and planets. The ceiling was so high that Jake could not see the top. Other aliens walked past them, and Jake tried not to stare. He saw creatures with 6 arms and rocky skin. He saw beings that looked like they were made of crystal. Some floated in the air without touching the ground. Others walked on more legs than Jake could count. "Your people are very young," Zethkar said as they walked. "Most species take millions of years to develop space travel. Humans have done it in just a few thousand years. Is that good or bad?" Ben asked. Zethkar's face did not change, but Jake thought he saw something like amusement in those black eyes. "It is interesting." They came to a huge door that was as tall as a building. It opened slowly, and Jake heard voices from inside. The sound was like 100 different languages all mixed together. Then machines changed the words into English. "The children have arrived," said a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "How cute," said another voice, this one high and musical. "They brought their little toys to show us." Jake felt his face get hot. He looked at Lisa, who was holding her briefcase tighter. Ben's jaw was set hard. The council chamber was enormous. It was like standing inside a planet. Thousands of aliens sat in rows that went up as far as Jake could see. In the center was a platform with a single chair. "That is where you will speak," Zethkar said softly. "Try not to be nervous. They are just curious about your species." Lisa walked to the platform. Her footsteps echoed in the huge space. She placed her briefcase on a small table and opened it. She pulled out pictures and documents about Earth. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began. Her voice was strong now. "I am Dr. Lisa Carter, representing the planet Earth and the human species. We come to you with respect and hope for friendship." A sound like laughter filled the Chamber. It was not mean laughter, but it was not kind either. It was the sound adults make when children say something silly. "Tell us about your achievements," called out a voice from high above. The machine translated it as coming from someone called High Chancellor Morden. Lisa began to speak about human history. She told them about the discovery of fire, the invention of the wheel, and the development of agriculture. She talked about human art, music, and literature. She showed them pictures of Earth cities and talked about how humans had learned to fly. More laughter filled the chamber. Jake felt his hands ball into fists. Lisa continued. She talked about nuclear power and computers. She showed them pictures of the space station and the colonies on Mars. She explained how humans had developed faster than light travel. Just 50 years ago, the laughter got louder. Jake heard comments from the crowd. "Adorable," said one voice. "They think nuclear power is an achievement," said another. "Look at their little rockets," said a third. High Chancellor Morden's voice boomed across the chamber. "Human representative, your species is very young. Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of the universe is limited. But you show promise." He paused, and Jake could feel the weight of thousands of alien eyes watching them. "We grant you observer status in the Galactic Council. You may watch our meetings and learn from us. Perhaps in a few thousand years you will be ready to contribute something meaningful to galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in what sounded like applause, but Jake knew it was not for them. It was the same sound people make when they watch a pet do a trick. Lisa stood straight and proud. "Thank you for this honor," she said. "We will do our best to learn and grow." As they were laid away from the chamber, Jake heard more comments from the aliens. "Such a quaint little species. I wonder how long they will last. At least they know their place." Zethkar led them to their quarters in what he called the maintenance sector. The rooms were small and plain, nothing like the beautiful chambers they had seen elsewhere on the ship. "Do not take their words to heart," Zethkar said quietly. "All species must start somewhere. Even the mighty hegemony was once young." After he left, the three humans sat in silence. Jake stared at the wall, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. "Well," Lisa said finally, "that could have gone better." Ben stood up and walked to the window. Outside he could see the stars and the other ships of the Galactic fleet. "They think we're jokes," he said. "Cute little primitives playing with toys." "Maybe we are," Jake said. "Did you see their technology? Did you see how they moved, how they talked?" "We're like ants compared to them." Lisa closed her briefcase with a sharp click. "No," she said firmly. "We're not ants, we're humans. And humans have always been underestimated." She looked at both men with determination in her eyes. "They think they know us, but they don't. They see our technology and think that's all we are. But they haven't seen what humans can do when we're pushed. They haven't seen our creativity, our stubbornness, our refusal to give up." Jake felt a spark of hope. "So what do we do?" "We learn," Lisa said. "We watch. We wait. And when the time comes, we show them what humans are really made of." Outside their window, the galaxy stretched out in all its glory. Somewhere out there were billions of worlds and trillions of beings who saw humans as nothing more than an amusing curiosity. They had no idea that this small, young species would soon change everything. 3 months had passed since the first meeting with the Galactic Council. Captain Amy Rodriguez stood in the busy marketplace of Nexus Prime, the galaxy's largest trading hub. The sounds and smells hit her like a wall. Thousands of different species moved through the market, buying and selling goods from across the galaxy. Amy had come here to trade for advanced technology that Earth needed. Her ship, the New Hope, was loaded with Earth's finest products. She had coffee, chocolate, music, and art, things that humans treasured. She hoped the aliens would want them too. A merchant with purple skin and 3 eyes looked at her approach. His stall was filled with glowing devices that Amy could not identify. One looked like it could power a small city. Another seemed to bend space around itself. "What do you want, little human?" the merchant asked. His voice was bored, like he was talking to a child. "I'd like to trade for some of your power cells," Amy said. She tried to sound professional and confident. The merchant laughed. It was not a nice sound. And what could you possibly offer that I would want? Amy opened her sample case. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. She had spent weeks learning about different alien species and their preferences. The Quellians, like this merchant, were supposed to enjoy new experiences. This is coffee, she said. It's a drink that humans enjoy. It has a unique flavor and gives energy. The merchant picked up a coffee bean and sniffed it. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence. Interesting, but hardly worth my advanced technology. He set the bean down like it was trash. I also have music, Amy said. She played a sample of Earth's classical music from her device. The merchant listened for a few seconds, then waved his hand. Primitive sound patterns. My people created better music when we were still crawling in mud? Amy felt her face get hot. What about chocolate, or these paintings? Little human, the merchant said, leaning forward. You are like a child trying to trade finger paintings for a starship. Your species makes cute little things, but they have no real value. Other merchants nearby had stopped to listen. Amy heard them whispering and laughing. She felt small and foolish, but she would not give up. Name your price, she said. The merchant's eyes gleamed. For 1 basic power cell, I want 50 units of your coffee, 20 of your music files, and 10 of your art pieces. Amy's heart sank. That was 10 times what the same technology would cost other species. But Earth needed this technology. Deal, she said quietly. As she loaded the single power cell into her ship, Amy heard the merchants laughing behind her. She knew they were talking about the stupid human who would pay any price for scraps. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Colonel Sam Hayes was having his own problems. He stood in the training center of the Galactic Defense Force, watching his human. Soldiers tried to keep up with alien troops. General Thakemore of the Brutari stood beside him. The alien was huge, with 4 arms and skin like armor. His voice was deep and rough. Your soldiers are weak, he said. They fight with emotion instead of logic. On the training field, human soldiers were practicing combat with Brutari warriors. The aliens moved like machines, each action perfect and calculated. They fought without feeling, without fear, without anger. The human soldiers were different. They shouted encouragement to each other. They showed concern when someone was hurt. They changed their tactics based on how they felt about the situation. They cared too much, General Thakemore continued. In real battle, emotion gets you killed. Your species will never be effective warriors. Sam watched as Private Jake Miller helped up a fallen comrade instead of continuing the exercise. The Brutari instructor shook his head in disgust. Humans fight for each other, Sam said. We fight for things we believe in. That's not weakness. It is inefficient, General Thakemore replied. Watch, he called out an order to his troops. Instantly they changed formation. No questions, no hesitation. They moved like one mind controlling many bodies. Sam tried the same with his soldiers. Formation change, pattern 7. The humans responded, but not instantly. They looked around, made sure their teammates were ready, adjusted their positions based on what they saw. It took longer, but Sam noticed something the alien general missed. The humans adapted their formation to fit the specific situation. They were not just following orders blindly. See? General Thakemore said, slow, confused, emotional. You will never be real soldiers. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Dr. Peter, Nash was having similar problems with the scientific community. He sat in a research lab on the planet Ethereal, surrounded by beings made of pure energy. They floated in the air, their bodies glowing with soft light. Your proposal is interesting, said the lead scientist, whose name was too complex for human tongues. But your methods are crude. You want to study alien biology by cutting things apart and looking at them under microscopes. That's how humans learn, Peter said. We observe, we test, we experiment. How primitive, another scientist said. We simply absorb knowledge directly into our consciousness. Your method is like trying to understand music by breaking instruments. Peter had spent months working on his research proposal. He wanted to study how different species had evolved across the galaxy. He believed that understanding biological diversity could help all species work together better. But you might miss important details, Peter argued. Physical examination reveals things that mental absorption cannot. The energy beings flickered with what Peter thought might be laughter. Young human, your species still thinks in terms of physical matter. You cannot understand the deeper truths of existence. They rejected his proposal without even reading it completely. Peter left the lab feeling defeated. His life's work was considered a joke by the galaxy's greatest minds. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos read the reports from her ambassadors and trade representatives. The news was not good. Humanity was being shut out of major galactic trade routes. Other species were forming alliances and treaties, but humans were not invited. "They're treating us like pets," said her advisor, Secretary of State Robert Chun. "We're cute and amusing, but not worth taking seriously." Maria looked at the star map on her wall. Earth was a tiny dot in a vast galaxy full of ancient civilizations. "What about our military partnerships?" General Thakmer's latest report says our soldiers are emotionally compromised and tactically inferior, Robert read. He recommends we stick to support roles. And the scientific exchanges? Dr. Nash's proposals have been rejected by every major research institution. They say our methods are too primitive to produce meaningful results. Maria felt the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. Earth had dreamed of joining the galactic community for generations. Now that dream was turning into a nightmare of condescension and dismissal. Her communication device chimed. A message from Jake Morrison on the council ship. She opened it and read his brief report. "Still being treated like observers," the message said. "Aliens discuss major decisions without asking human opinion. Yesterday, they voted on new trade regulations that will hurt Earth's economy. When I tried to speak, High Chancellor Morden told me that children should listen more and talk less." Maria closed the message and stared out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, among all those stars, were civilizations that had existed for millions of years. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had wisdom that came from eons of experience, but they were wrong about humanity. Maria knew it in her bones. They saw humans as young and primitive, but they did not understand what those words really meant. Young did not mean weak. Primitive did not mean stupid. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues. They had built civilizations from nothing. They had learned to fly when everyone said it was impossible. They had split the atom and reached for the stars. The galaxy thought it knew humanity, but it had only seen the surface. It had seen human technology and found it lacking. It had seen human methods and found them crude. It had seen human emotions and found them inefficient. But the galaxy had not seen what humans could do when they were pushed to their limits. It had not seen human creativity when faced with impossible problems. It had not seen human stubbornness when told they could not succeed. Maria made a decision. She would not let humanity be dismissed as a joke. She would not let Earth become a curiosity for ancient aliens to study. Somehow, someway, humans would prove their worth. She just hoped they would get the chance to do it before the galaxy forgot about them entirely. The stars outside her window seemed to twinkle with possibilities. Hidden among them were dangers that the galaxy had not yet imagined. Soon, those dangers would test every species, every civilization, every assumption about strength and weakness, and when that test came, humanity would be ready to show the galaxy what they were really made. OF. The emergency alarm filled the council chamber with its harsh sound. Jake Morrison had never heard anything like it before. The alien representatives who usually sat calmly in their seats were now moving quickly, their voices filled with panic. High Chancellor Morden's voice boomed across the chamber. His usual calm was gone, replaced by something that sounded like fear. "All council members, return to your seats immediately. We have received reports from the Outer Rim." Jake took his place in the small section reserved for observers. He looked around at the thousands of alien faces. For the first time since he had arrived, they were not looking at him with amusement or dismissal. They were looking at the main screen with terror. The screen showed a star system that Jake did not recognize. At least it had been a star system. Now there was only empty space and strange metal objects that moved like living things. "The Shintar system is gone," announced Speaker Vexthaler of the Crystalline Collective. Her voice, usually musical, now sounded like breaking glass. 3 billion Valkyrie colonists, all dead. A gasp went through the chamber. Jake felt his stomach drop. 3 billion people, gone. He had trouble even imagining such a huge number. "What happened?" called out a voice from the upper levels. The screen changed to show a recording. Jake watched in horror as massive metal creatures moved through space. They were not ships in any sense he understood. They were like mechanical monsters, each one. The size of a moon. They moved toward planets and stars, and everything they touched simply disappeared. "They call themselves the Devourers," said General Thakmor. Even the mighty Brutari warrior sounded shaken. "They appeared from the Galactic. Core 6 days ago. They consume everything in their path." "Consume how?" asked Ambassador Zethkar. "They break down matter at the atomic level," explained a scientist Jake did not recognize. "They turn planets, stars, even space stations into more of themselves. Each attack makes them stronger and more numerous." Jake watched the recording as one of the metal creatures approached a Valkyrie battleship. The ship fired everything it had at the monster. Laser beams, plasma cannons, and weapons Jake had no names for. The creature absorbed every attack and grew larger. Then it reached out with metal tentacles and pulled the ship apart piece by piece. "How many systems have they taken?" High Chancellor Morden asked. 12 confirmed, came the reply. "Mordian Gate fell yesterday. The Quellian industrial complex is gone. The refugees are flooding into the inner systems." Jake had been to Mordian Gate with Captain Amy Rodriguez just 2 weeks ago. It was a massive trading hub with billions of people from dozens of species. Now it was nothing but empty space and metal creatures. "What do we know about their technology?" asked someone from the scientific section. "Advanced beyond our understanding," replied the scientist. "They appear to be some form of artificial intelligence. Ancient, possibly millions of years old. They learn from every encounter." "Learn how?" General Thakmor demanded. "They adapt to every weapon we use against them. The Valkyrie fleet at Shintar used quantum torpedoes. The creatures absorbed the energy and developed immunity within hours. The Brutari attack at Kilos Prime used kinetic bombardment. The creatures learned to deflect solid projectiles." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An enemy that learned from every attack, that got stronger with every battle. How could anyone fight such a thing? "We need a unified response," High Chancellor Morden declared. "All species must contribute their best ships and weapons." "Agreed," said General Thakmor. "The Brutari will lead the assault. Our warriors do not know fear." "The Crystalline Collective will provide support," added Speaker Vexthaler. "Our ships can coordinate the attack." "The ethereal beings will handle strategy," said another voice. "We will calculate the most efficient approach." Jake listened as the great powers of the galaxy began to plan their response. Each species wanted to contribute in their own way, but they all had the same basic approach. Hit the enemy with overwhelming force using their best technology and most logical tactics. Jake raised his hand. A few aliens noticed, but most ignored. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Excuse me." The chamber grew quiet. Thousands of alien eyes turned to look at the human observer. High Chancellor Morden's voice carried a note of irritation. "What is it, human?" Jake felt his heart pound, but he forced himself to speak. "I've been watching the recordings. The creatures seem to have a pattern." "A pattern?" General Thakmor laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "They destroy everything they touch." "What pattern is there in total destruction?" "They learn from repetition," Jake said. "Each time you use the same tactic or weapon, they adapt faster." "But look at this part of the recording." He pointed to a section where a small refugee ship had managed to escape. The ship had not followed standard evacuation procedures. Instead, it had moved in a random, chaotic pattern that seemed to confuse the creatures. The ship that escaped did not follow normal flight patterns, Jake continued. It moved unpredictably. The creatures seemed to have trouble targeting it. High Chancellor Morden waved his hand dismissively. Random movement is not a strategy, it is desperation. But it worked, Jake said. The ship survived when larger, more powerful vessels did not. The children should remain quiet while the adults discuss serious matters, High Chancellor Morden said. His tone was final. Jake sat back down, his face burning with embarrassment. Around him, the alien representatives continued their planning. They would gather their fleets and attack the creatures with everything they had. They would use their most advanced weapons and their most logical strategies, but Jake had a terrible feeling that it would not be enough. The creatures learned from logic. They adapted to patterns. They grew stronger from every predictable response. The meeting continued for hours. The great powers divided up responsibilities and made plans. The Brutari would provide the heavy assault ships. The Crystalline Collective would coordinate communications. The ethereal beings would run battle simulations. No one asked what humans might contribute. No one even considered that the youngest, most primitive species might have something useful to offer. As the meeting ended, Jake walked back to his quarters. He passed groups of aliens talking in hushed voices. They were scared, but they were also confident. They had fought wars for millions of years. They had the best technology in the galaxy. They would find a way to stop the creatures. Jake wished he could share their confidence. But something in his gut told him they were making a mistake. The creatures were not just powerful, they were smart. They learned. And they were coming. In his quarters, Jake sat down at his communication device. He composed a message to President Maria Santos on Earth. He told her about the creatures and the galaxy's response. He shared his concerns about the rigid tactics and predictable strategies. The galaxy is about to face its greatest test, he wrote. They have all the advantages except one. They think in patterns, they follow rules, they do what makes sense. But these creatures learn from sense. They adapt to patterns. They grow stronger from rules. He paused, then added, maybe it's time for the galaxy to try something that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's time for something unpredictable. He sent the message and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the creatures were consuming entire worlds. And somewhere else, the combined fleets of the galaxy were preparing to meet them with the same kinds of tactics that had already failed. Jake had a feeling that the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about the dangers of being too predictable. He only hoped that lesson would not cost them everything. 3 days later, the first reports came in from the front lines. The United Galactic Fleet had engaged the creatures at Kalos Station. The battle had been a disaster. Half the fleet was destroyed and the creatures had grown even stronger. The galaxy was beginning to panic. Their best weapons had failed. Their greatest strategies had been useless. The creatures were learning faster than anyone had imagined, and they were heading straight for the heart of galactic civilization. Jake Morrison sat in his quarters and waited for someone to ask the right question. Not, how do we hit them harder? Or, what weapon haven't we tried yet? But, what would someone do who doesn't think like us? He had a feeling that question would be asked soon. And when it was, humanity would finally get its chance to show what they were really made of. Captain Ben Clark stood on the bridge of the human ship Earth's Pride and looked at the massive alien fleet ahead of him. There were thousands of ships from dozens of species, all gathering to defend Kalos Station. The station was huge, a metal city floating in space that built ships and weapons for half the galaxy. Sensors show over 3,000 alien vessels, reported his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Kelly. Ours looks pretty small in comparison, Ben nodded. The human fleet had only 20 ships. They were good ships, built with Earth's best technology, but they were tiny compared to the alien giants around them. A single Brutari battleship was bigger than 5 human vessels combined. Admiral Kiffer is requesting to speak with you, Sarah said. Ben straightened his uniform. Admiral Kiffer was the Valkyrie commander in charge of the defense. Ben had met him once before and remembered the alien's cold, calculating eyes. The communication screen flickered to life. Admiral Kiffer's blue face filled the screen, his forearms crossed in what Ben had learned was a sign of impatience. "Human Captain," Kiffer said, his voice flat. "I have received orders to include your ships in our defense plan." "We're ready to help however we can," Ben replied. "You will patrol the outer edge of the system," Kiffer continued. "Stay away from the main battle. Your ships are too small and your weapons too weak to make any real difference." Ben felt his jaw tighten. "With respect, Admiral, my ships are fast and my crews are experienced." "Experienced fighting what?" Kiffer asked. "Pirates? Smugglers? You have never faced anything like the Devourers. Leave the real fighting to those who understand." "Warfare." The communication ended before Ben could respond. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged angry looks. They had trained for months to fight alongside the Galactic fleet. Now they were being told to stay out of the way like children. "Orders from the fleet commander," Ben announced to his ships. "We're assigned to perimeter patrol." Captain Amy Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from her ship, the Earth's Fury. "Perimeter patrol? They want us to babysit empty space while they do the fighting?" "Those are our orders," Ben said, though he did not like them any more than she did. 2 days later, the Devourers arrived. Ben watched from the edge of the system as the metal creatures appeared. They were even more terrifying in person than in the recordings. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in tentacles and weapons that seemed to shift and change as he watched. "Count 27 Devourer units," Sarah reported. "They're moving toward Kalos Station." The alien fleet moved to intercept them. Ben had to admit it was impressive. Thousands of ships moving in perfect formation, their weapons charging up to deliver devastating attacks. The Brutari ships formed the front line, their armor thick and their weapons heavy. The crystalline collective ships provided support, their energy weapons glowing like stars. The ethereal beings coordinated everything from their command ships. "Fleet commander to all ships," came Admiral Kiffer's voice. "Attack pattern 7. All vessels engage the enemy." Ben watched as the alien fleet opened fire. The space between the fleets lit up like a fireworks show. Beams of energy, plasma bolts, and weapons Ben had no names for all struck the Devourer creatures. For a moment, Ben thought it might work. The creatures seemed to slow down under the massive attack. But then something changed. The creatures began to absorb the energy from the weapons hitting them. They grew larger and brighter. "They're adapting," Sarah whispered, "just like in the reports." The creatures reached out with their metal tentacles and grabbed the nearest alien ships. Ben watched in horror as proud Brutari battleships were torn apart like toys. The creatures learned from each attack, becoming immune to weapons as soon as they were used. "Fleet is taking heavy losses," reported Lieutenant Mike Torres from the sensor station. "They're requesting all reserve units to engage." "That's U.S.," Ben said. He opened communications to his small fleet. "All ships move to attack position. Stay together and follow my lead." "But Admiral Kiffer said to stay on perimeter," Sarah pointed out. "Admiral Kiffer is about to lose his entire fleet," Ben replied. "We're going in." The human ships moved toward the battle. They were so small compared to the alien vessels that at first the Devourers did not even notice them. The creatures were busy tearing apart larger, more obvious targets. "What's the plan, Captain?" Amy Rodriguez asked over the communication system. Ben looked at the chaos of the battle. The alien ships were still fighting in formation, using the same tactics they had planned. Even as their ships were destroyed, they stuck to their careful strategies. "No plan," Ben said. "That's the point. Everyone pick a target and attack however you think best. Don't coordinate. Don't follow patterns. Just do whatever feels right." "Sir?" Sarah asked, confused. "The creatures learn from patterns," Ben explained. "So we don't give them any patterns to learn from." The human ships spread out and attacked in completely different ways. The Earth's Fury came in fast and low, firing rapid bursts before spinning away. The New Hope approached from above, dropping mines in a random pattern. The Star Runner used its speed to dart in and out, never staying in one place long enough for the creatures to target it. The Devourers seemed confused. They had adapted to every alien weapon and tactic, but the humans were not using tactics. They were just making it up as they went along. Ben's ship, the Earth's Pride, flew straight at one of the creatures. The creature reached out with a tentacle to grab him, but Ben rolled his ship at the last second and fired his missiles into what looked like a weak spot. The explosion damaged the creature, making it stumble backward. "It worked!" Sarah shouted. "You heard it!" The creature turned toward them, learning from the attack. But by then, Ben was already doing something completely different. He flew in a spiral pattern while firing his railguns, then suddenly reversed direction and launched his remaining torpedoes all around the battle. The human ships were doing the impossible. They were hurting the Devourers. Not because their weapons were stronger or their ships were better, but because they were unpredictable. Amy Rodriguez led what looked like a suicide charge straight into the middle of three creatures. At the last second, her ship split into two parts. It was a new human design, built for desperate situations. The creatures, expecting one target, suddenly faced two. The confusion gave Amy time to fire directly into their central cores, the alien. Fleet commanders watched in amazement as the tiny human ships accomplished what their massive fleets could not. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable were now struggling to adapt to human tactics that had no patterns. "Human vessels," came Admiral Kiffer's voice, and Ben could hear the shock in it. "How are you doing this?" "We're not thinking," Ben replied. "We're just fighting." But even as the humans fought, the situation was getting worse. There were too many creatures and not enough human ships. Ben's fleet was taking damage, and he had lost 3 ships already. "Captain," Sarah said, "we can't keep this up much longer. We're outnumbered 20-1. Ben looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet was in full retreat. Callow Station was evacuating its population. The battle was lost, but the humans had proven something important. "All ships," Ben announced, "cover the evacuation. Make sure those civilian ships get away safely." The human ships formed a protective screen around the escaping refugees. They flew in crazy patterns, confusing the creatures and drawing their attention away from the helpless civilian vessels. The Earth's Fury took a direct hit from a creature's energy beam. Amy's ship spun out of control, its engines failing, too. Creatures moved in to finish it off. "Amy!" Ben shouted into his communicator. "I'm okay," Amy's voice came back, strained but determined. "Engines are dead, but weapons still work. I'll buy you some time." Her ship, drifting powerless through space, suddenly opened fire with everything it had. The creatures, expecting a dead target, were caught off guard. Amy's sacrifice gave the civilian ships the time they needed to escape. The human fleet fought until their ammunition was gone and their ships were barely holding together. When the retreat order finally came, only half of them were still able to fly, but they had saved millions of lives. They had proven that the Devourers could be hurt, and they had shown the galaxy something it had never seen before. As Ben's damaged ship limped away from the battle, he received an unexpected communication. It was from General Thakmer, the Brutari commander who had called humans weak and emotional. "Human Captain," the general's voice was different now, respectful. "Your tactics today were effective. I would like to learn more about your methods." Ben smiled despite his exhaustion. "General, human tactics aren't really tactics at all. We just do what feels right and hope for the best." "That," General Thakmer said slowly, "is exactly what makes you dangerous to our enemies." The Battle of Callow Station was lost, but something had changed. For the first time since humanity joined the galactic community, the other species were looking at them with respect instead of amusement. The galaxy was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, the primitive young species had something to teach them after all. The command center on the Galactic Council ship was busier than Jake Morrison had ever seen it. Alien officers rushed back and forth, carrying reports and updating star maps. The news from Callow Station had shaken everyone to their core. "General," Thakmor stood at the main planning table, his forearms moving as he gestured at the holographic display. For the first time since Jake had met him, the proud Brutari warrior looked uncertain. "Show me again," General Thakmor said to his aide. "The part where the human ships engaged the creatures." The hologram replayed the battle. Jake watched as the tiny, human fleet broke away from standard formations and attacked in ways that made no sense according to military doctrine. Ships flew in random patterns, changed tactics mid-battle, and used weapons in ways they were never designed for. "I do not understand," said Admiral Kiffer, who had survived the battle but lost most of his fleet. "Their actions appear chaotic. There is no strategy, no coordination. How did this defeat the creatures when our superior tactics failed?" Jake cleared his throat. All eyes in the room turned to him. A few weeks ago, these same officers would have ignored him completely. Now they waited to hear what he had to say. "May I?" Jake asked, pointing to the controls for the hologram. General Thakmor nodded. "Please, explain what we are seeing." Jake manipulated the display, slowing down the recording and highlighting specific moments. "Look here," he said. "When Captain Rodriguez's ship splits in two, the creatures stop moving for almost 3 seconds. They're trying to process what happened." "Processing?" Admiral Kiffer asked. "The creatures learn by recognizing patterns," Jake explained. "When you use the same formation twice, they learn to counter it. When you fire the same weapons in the same way, they adapt. But humans don't follow patterns the way other species do." Dr. Peter Nash entered the command center, carrying a tablet full of data. The other alien scientists had finally agreed to let him examine the remains of destroyed Devourer units. His face was excited but tired. "I've figured out how they're learning." "System works," Peter announced. "Each creature has what we might call an artificial brain. It records every attack, every tactic, every weapon used against it. Then it shares that information with all the other creatures instantly. So they become immune to anything we use against them," General Thakmor said grimly. "Exactly," Peter continued. "But here's the interesting part. Their learning system is based on logic patterns. It expects rational, predictable behavior. When humans do something that doesn't follow logical rules, the system struggles to process it." Speaker Vex Thaler of the Crystalline Collective joined the conversation. Her crystal body was dimmer than usual, a sign of stress among her people. "Are you saying that illogical behavior is an advantage?" "Not illogical," Jake corrected. "Creative. Adaptive. Human tactics change based on emotion, instinct, and split-second decisions. We don't stick to plans when they're not working." Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, Dr. Lisa Carter was having a different but equally important conversation. She sat across from Ambassador Zethkar in his private chambers. The Velkari diplomat looked older than when she had first met him, worn down by the crisis facing the galaxy. "My people are frightened," Zethkar admitted. "We have ruled this sector for 10,000 years. Our empire was built on order, structure, and careful planning. Now you tell us that chaos might be our salvation." "Not chaos," Lisa said gently. "Flexibility. The ability to change when change is needed." Zethkar poured tea from an elegant crystal pot. The liquid was blue and smelled like flowers. "Your species confuses us. You make decisions based on feelings. You change your minds when new information appears. You argue with your leaders and question authority. And you see this as weakness," Lisa said. "We did," Zethkar replied, "but after Kalos Station I am not so sure. Our rigid command structure prevented our ships from adapting when the original plan failed. Your Captain Clark ignored orders." "And saved thousands of lives," Lisa sipped her tea. It tasted like nothing she had ever experienced, sweet and bitter at the same time. "Different doesn't mean better or worse. It just means different." "Perhaps," Zethkar said. "But tell me, Dr. Carter, how do we learn to think like humans? How does a species that has followed the same patterns for millennia suddenly become unpredictable?" Back in the command center, the conversation was becoming more intense. High Chancellor Morden had arrived and was listening to the reports with growing concern. The creatures are moving toward the Nexus of Worlds, he announced. Our capital system. If they take it, galactic civilization will collapse. The Nexus of Worlds was the heart of the galaxy's government, trade, and culture. Billions of beings from hundreds of species lived there. It was the most heavily defended system in known space. How long do we have? General Fakemar asked. 4 days, Morden replied. Maybe 5. Our remaining fleets can be there in 3 days, Admiral Kithver said. But after Kalos Station, I do not believe conventional tactics will work. All eyes turned to Jake. He felt the weight of their expectations and tried not to show how nervous he was. We need to combine human and alien capabilities, Jake said. Use your technology with our tactics. Your strength with our flexibility. How? General Fakemar demanded. Jake looked at the holographic display showing the approaching threat. Mixed crews. Human and alien officers working together on the same ships. Human tactical advisors for your fleet commanders. Your weapons and shields, our strategies. Impossible, Admiral Kithver said immediately. Different species cannot serve together effectively. We have different biology, different psychology, different ways of thinking. That's exactly why it will work, Peter Nash interjected. The creatures learn from patterns. But if our crews are mixed, our patterns will be mixed too, unpredictable. Hi. Chancellor Morden was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see him weighing the options. Traditional tactics had failed. The galaxy's survival was at stake. It has never been done before, Morden said finally. Nothing we're facing has been done before, Jake replied. The creatures are unlike any enemy the galaxy has ever fought. Maybe it's time to try something that has never been done before. Doctor. Lisa Carter's voice came through the communication system. Chancellor, I'm with Ambassador Zethkar. The Velkari Empire is willing to try joint crews with human officers. General Fakemar straightened up. If the Velkari are willing, the Brutari will not be shown up. We accept human tactical advisors. One by one, the other species agreed. The crystalline collective, the ethereal beings, even the proud hegemony. They would try something that went against thousands of years of tradition. We'll need time to integrate the crews, Admiral Kithver pointed out. We don't have time, Jake said. We'll have to figure it out as we go. That, said General Fakemar with something that might have been a smile, sounds very human. The next day, Captain Ben Clark arrived with what remained of the human fleet. His ships were battered, but his crews were ready. He met with the alien commanders and began the impossible task of teaching them to think like humans. Forget everything you know about proper tactics, Ben told a room full of alien officers. When you see the enemy, don't think about what the manual says to do. Think about what would surprise them. Colonel Sam Hayes worked with mixed crews, teaching alien soldiers how to adapt on the battlefield. Trust your instincts, he told them. If something feels wrong, change the plan. If something feels right, do it even if it doesn't make sense. Amy Rodriguez, her ship repaired and upgraded with alien technology, LED training exercises that looked more like organized chaos than military drills. Ships from different species flew together, learning to coordinate without following rigid patterns. Dr. Peter Nash worked with alien scientists to understand the creatures better. We need to feed them false information, he explained. Make them think they're learning our patterns when really we're teaching them the wrong lessons. As the fleet prepared for the final battle, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck and watched ships from dozens of species working together in ways that had never been tried before. Human officers served alongside aliens they could barely communicate with. Alien crews learned to make split-second decisions, based on gut feelings rather than computer calculations. It should have been a disaster. According to every rule of military science, mixed crews from different species should not work. The language barriers, cultural differences, and biological incompatibilities should have made cooperation impossible, but somehow it was working. The mixed crews were clumsy at first, but they were learning. More importantly, they were learning to be unpredictable. 4 hours until we reached the Nexus, Admiral Kithfer announced. Jake looked out at the stars ahead. Somewhere beyond them, the creatures were approaching the heart of galactic civilization. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy survived or fell to an enemy that learned from every mistake. For the first time since this crisis began, Jake felt hopeful. The galaxy had finally stopped trying to fight the creatures with logic and predictability. Now they were going to try something new. They were going to fight like humans. The Nexus of Worlds had never seen anything like it. The massive space around the galaxy's capital was filled with ships from every known species. But for the first time in history, they were not arranged by race or empire. Human ships flew alongside. Valkyrie cruisers, Brutari battleships worked with crystalline collective vessels. The proud fleets that had kept separate for thousands of years were now mixed together like ingredients in a recipe. Captain Ben Clark stood on the bridge of the Earth's Pride, but he was not alone. Beside him stood General Fakemur, the Brutari warrior who had once called humans weak and emotional. At the tactical station, Lieutenant Sarah Kelly worked with a crystalline being whose name she could not pronounce but who understood computer systems better than anyone. "Devourers are approaching," reported the alien at the sensor station. His voice was calm, but Ben could see the fear in his 6 eyes. 43 units, larger than any we have seen before. Ben looked at the main screen. The creatures were enormous now, having consumed the matter from dozens of star systems. Each one was the size of a small planet, covered in weapons and tentacles that moved like living things. "All ships prepare for engagement," Admiral Kithfer's voice came through the communication system. "Remember, no formations, no patterns. Trust your human partners." On the Valkyrie command ship, Jake Morrison sat beside Admiral Kithfer. It was strange to think that just months ago these same aliens had laughed at humanity. Now they were asking humans to help save their civilization. "What is your suggestion, Commander Morrison?" Admiral Kithfer asked. Jake studied the tactical display. The creatures were approaching in a perfect formation, exactly as their logic would predict for an efficient attack. "They expect us to meet them head-on," Jake said. "So let's do something else entirely." Dr. Lisa Carter was on the diplomatic channel, coordinating with representatives from all the species. "Remember," she told them, "this is not about who is strongest or smartest. This is about working together in ways the creatures cannot predict." The battle began in a way that made no sense according to any military manual ever written. Instead of meeting the creatures head-on, the combined fleet scattered in all directions. Some ships flew toward the creatures at full speed. Others moved slowly, as if they were afraid. A few ships even flew away from the battle entirely. The creatures paused, their mechanical minds trying to process what they were seeing. They had learned to counter organized attacks, defensive formations, and retreat patterns. But this was none of those things. Captain Amy Rodriguez led her mixed squadron in what looked like a panicked retreat. Her ships fled toward the outer edge of the system, broadcasting distress signals. 3 Devourer units followed them, thinking they were chasing defeated enemies. "Now," Amy whispered into her communicator. The retreating ships suddenly spun around and attacked with everything they had. But they were not alone. Hidden behind asteroids and debris, ships from a dozen species opened fire at the same time. The Devourer units, expecting to catch fleeing prey, found themselves surrounded and outnumbered. Meanwhile, Ben Clark was leading the strangest attack in military history. His mixed fleet approached the main group of creatures in a spiral pattern that kept changing. Human intuition guided alien precision as the ships wove between the creatures' tentacles, striking at weak points that computer analysis had identified. "Their central processing unit is exposed," reported the crystalline being at Ben's tactical station. "Then let's hit it," Ben replied. But instead of a direct assault, he ordered his ships to attack from 6 different directions at once, each group using different weapons and tactics. The creatures tried to adapt, but every time they adjusted to one attack, another group would change its approach. Human creativity combined with alien technology. created a chaotic but effective assault that the creatures could not learn from. Dr. Peter Nash was coordinating the scientific attack from the research vessel Discovery. His mixed crew of human and alien scientists had found a way to confuse the creatures' learning systems. Sending false pattern data now, Peter announced. His team broadcast fake tactical information to the creatures, making them think they had learned the Allied fleet's strategies. The creatures adjusted their defenses to counter attacks that were not really coming. "They're adapting to the wrong patterns," reported his ethereal science partner. "Their defensive systems are now vulnerable to the attacks we are actually using." Jake Morrison watched from the command ship as the battle unfolded. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Every seemingly random move was part of a larger plan that existed only in the moment, changing and adapting as the battle progressed. "Human Commander," General Fakmar's voice came through his communicator. "Your people are teaching mine to think in ways I did not know were possible." "Your people are teaching mine what it means to fight with real strength," Jake replied. The battle raged for hours. Ships were lost and brave beings from many species gave their lives. But slowly, impossibly, the creatures began to fall. Their learning systems, designed to counter logical opponents, could not handle the creative chaos of human-led tactics. Combined with alien capabilities, High Chancellor Morden opened a channel to all ships. "The creatures are retreating toward the galactic core. They cannot adapt to our new methods." A cheer went up from thousands of ships. Beings who had never worked together before celebrated as one people. The galaxy had been saved not by superior technology or military might, but by learning to think differently. In the aftermath of the battle, the real work began. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, but this time humans were not sitting in the observer section. Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Carter, and Captain Ben Clark sat at the main council table as full members. High Chancellor Morden stood before the assembled representatives. His voice was different now, humble and respectful. "We have learned something important today. For too long we believed that our way was the only way. We thought that order, logic, and tradition were the only paths to strength." He paused and looked directly at the human delegation. "We were wrong. The humans have shown us that sometimes strength comes from the unexpected. Sometimes wisdom comes from those we think are too young to understand. Sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all." Speaker Vex Staller of the Crystalline Collective rose to speak. "The creatures could adapt to our technology because our technology followed patterns. They could counter our tactics because our tactics followed rules. But humans think outside of patterns and rules." "The humans saved us," admitted General Fakmer. "Not because they were stronger than us, but because they were different from us. And in that difference we found salvation." The Council voted unanimously to restructure the Galactic Alliance. No longer would species be ranked by age or technological advancement. No longer would the older civilizations make decisions for the younger ones. Instead, all species would contribute according to their unique strengths and perspectives. Humanity was officially welcomed as a full partner in galactic civilization. But more than that, the concept of partnership itself was redefined. The galaxy learned that diversity was not a weakness to be managed, but a strength to be celebrated. Captain Amy Rodriguez was promoted to admiral and given command of the new Rapid Response Fleet, a mixed-species force designed to handle unexpected threats. Colonel Sam Hayes became the head of the Galactic Defense Academy, teaching officers from all species how to adapt and improvise. Dr. Peter Nash was appointed head of the new Department of Xenological Studies, dedicated to understanding how different species could work together more effectively. Years later, Jake Morrison stood in his office as the first human member of the Galactic Council High Command. Through his window, he could see the busy traffic of the Nexus of Worlds. Ships from hundreds of species moved in patterns that would have seemed chaotic to the old galaxy, but which worked perfectly for the new one. Children from dozens of different species played together in the parks below. They did not see each other as alien or strange. They just saw friends who happened to look different and think differently. Their games were creative and unpredictable, mixing traditions from across the galaxy in ways that created something entirely new. Dr. Lisa Carter entered his office, carrying reports from the outer sectors. The integration programs are working better than we hoped, she said. Mixed crews are becoming the standard throughout the fleet. Any problems? Jake asked. A few cultural misunderstandings, but nothing serious. It turns out that when people work together toward a common goal, differences become strengths instead of barriers. Jake nodded and turned back to the window. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The species that had been mocked as primitive children were now valued teachers. The traits that had been seen as weaknesses were now recognized as essential strengths. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the best answers come from those who ask different questions. Sometimes the strongest allies are those who seem the weakest. And sometimes the future belongs not to those who follow the old rules, but to those who are brave enough to write new ones.